First thing on the agenda is public comment, and anybody wishing to make a public comment, I ask that you make it 2 minutes, and we'll go through everybody that wants to speak first. Anybody for public comment? Hearing none. Anything at the table from the public here? Perfect. Item number 2, discuss an act on ISP contract with Crocker Communications for the broadband BI Island Network. And I believe Amy Land is on the phone.
Yeah, we have a couple of folks here joining us tonight to discuss the contract with Crocker. Joining us is Finance Director Amy Land, John Dougherty from Mission Broadband, and Jim Rogers was having trouble linking in, so he's the other one that may join us in this conversation. So the contract is up before you this evening. There was a number of attachments, and Amy and the folks from Mission Broadband are here this evening to see if the council has any specific questions. As the council requested, the last time we brought forward to you a contract regarding broadband, our solicitors did review the contract, and they were fine with it. I did communicate that with our solicitors.
Amy, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hi. Do you want to just give for the large audience here a top line of the agreement and any things that you think one should be aware of on either the plus or the either the good or the concerning side? No
I'm going to see first if our mission team wants to start off. If they don't, then I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. Thank you. Jim, John, thank you both.
Yep. Sorry, having a hard time hearing the commissioners. I heard you clear, Amy, so we are good.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here.
Yes, thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Counselors, sorry. Yeah, so this is the other piece of the contract, or the partners that we've talked about in the past, whereas this is the internet service provider. And so they are the ones that were providing the actual services overall to every subscriber. They'll be doing the upfront billing, the upfront, if you have issues, you're calling them. They'll take care of the issues, over the phone if they can, and then there'll be a handoff over if we need somebody on site, which will be the Certex folks. It's an overarching agreement, master services agreement, that takes into the scope of everything that's involved with that side of the internet service piece. So if you remember, Certex is the operator, so they're going to make sure that all the wires are run and the screws are where they're supposed to be and the network's working. The service provider is the one that's going to actually provide the service going to the World Wide Web, as they say, to the internet. And this agreement you have in front of you is I'll say lots of months of work and one last big milestone to get this network off the ground. And the folks, Crocker Communications, I want to say, give them a shout out, if you will. They've done a good job, that they continue to progress with their work, even though the contract hasn't been signed, so that when the contract is signed, that we're a whole lot closer to where we need to be. The general terms and conditions, are outlined, obviously, and I can, Jim and I can answer any questions you may have within there, but it's, I will say typical on our side where, they level set with what is the service, what are the service level agreements, what can a subscriber expect on a daily, weekly, yearly basis from I'll say a connectivity standpoint. Whereas, and then overall with the town, what's your expectations of the service provider? Because, this is your network, and how will this service, this internet service provider provide quality services to all the subscribers, to include residential and business, so they get the services and really the bandwidth, which is what's been starving on the island for years now. Are they going to get those, what has been agreed to? And so there'll be, oversight, obviously, in reports that the town will receive showing that The quality of the service is there. The customers are getting, what they have signed up for, that they're happy with the customer service. Obviously, there's a variety of ways to contact the server, Crocker, in this case, from phone calls to emails to, a variety of things, and escalation lists, for the town if need be. They'll be using telephone services. They'll be doing reporting on, phone services as well. So over the top video, as we've talked about before. So they provide technical support to all of the above for the subscribers. And that's a general overview. I'll refer to Jim if he's got some additional information he wants to share.
Thanks, JD. We're really excited about getting this contract done. A lot of people have put a lot of work and many, many hours. We started working on this over a year ago. It was probably the most complicated contract that we had to deal with. We needed to make sure that the town's interests were protected, and that the contract was extremely fair to the town. But we also needed to work out the requirements that the ISP, Crocker Communications, had. Anyway, we got through it. It's had the eyes of our technology contract attorney, in addition to your town solicitor, and it's passed. But it's gone through a lot of iterations, a lot of changes, a lot of modifications. Amy Land, Lewis Land worked very closely with us on the agreement, and so I guess I'm very, very excited that we got through it, and I'm pleased that it is going to really, I believe, really meet the needs of the town. So we're certainly welcome to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Amy, anything to add?
Sure, just 3 more technical data points. One would be that the terms and the pricing that you're seeing reflected in this agreement are consistent with the RFP that the town had issued in 2019. So that underpins everything that you're seeing in that contract. The second point would be that it is a 5-year contract length that is renewable, agreed upon between the parties, but that's the initial term. And then I did want to acknowledge that Crocker has actually been with this project for quite some time. They responded to the town's very first RFI when it became clear that we were going to have a subsea cable, and that was back in 2016. And they responded to the final RFP in 2019, but they've been ready and willing as a partner for New Shore for quite some time. So we're glad to have this contract in place. But I think we're happy to take questions if anyone has them.
I've got a few, but you guys go first. Anybody? Mark?
I'll ask a question that maybe a lot of people listening in might have. Right now, I have DirecTV. Something happens to it, I call up, and I get the Muzak version of whatever song's playing, and I'm on there for about a half an hour. If there's a problem with the new setup, can you explain the sequence that we're going to encounter when we call up that number?
You want me to grab that one, Jim?
Sure, JD. Well, you want to talk about the Crocker Help Desk?
Yes.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up that.
While you're pulling it up, this is Jim Rogers. I'll just mention that Crocker, as part of this contract, is providing help desk services for support, a 24-hour number, that there will be an 800 number along with email that people can send in unless their email isn't working, of course. So they can call a number, and there'll be that's kind of funny to say that they can email in, but if they're calling because their network isn't working. So there'll be an 800 number primarily, and Crocker does maintain this help desk that will support the user. They they're not a gigantic company like a what was the one you just mentioned?
DirecTV.
Yeah, DirecTV. They're a New England company. And we believe that we believe, because we don't know, we haven't used it yet. But we do believe that the quality of service will be good. And we did set metrics on what they have to deliver for quality of service.
Thank you. Keith?
One of the advantages of rainy and windy days is that you actually read these things a few times, and I have to say I've sort of, as you know, Amy, I've sort of had a running list of questions over the last year, probably plus, and I have to say, I think you and Crocker and Mission and presumably Surtex really did an extraordinary job of checking a lot of the boxes. I think it's, in a way, it's too bad we only have a few people here, because this is, to me, the most public-facing aspect of the entire project is this contract here. You know, I don't know a junction box and a signal booster from Adam, but I do know the calls that we'll all get, like who's on island because my internet is down. That'll be one of the first questions we get. So I just have a couple of thoughts that came to me and a few questions. One is, I don't know whether this is something that would be done by Crocker or be done by the town, but it's become increasingly clear to me when I talk to people that not everyone is used to or has ever done streaming television. Whether that's Netflix or Hulu or Amazon, insert the name here. And it strikes me that there would be value in having several training sessions for people even just with a sample smart TV in the basement of the library to teach people how to use this extraordinary technology that we're getting. I mean, I think we've been so caught up in seeing the Surtex trucks and, the vote was a while ago and all that. It really is, this is an extraordinary asset that the town has purchased here. It's incumbent upon us, I think, at least initially, to ensure that the fruits of that investment are enjoyed as widely as we can among subscribers. So, I'm not sure whether there's a plan for that, but it seems like that would be a worthwhile thing to do across the population. But I've noticed particularly people who are older like me don't really have a handle on how streaming works. So we should, I think, do that.
And Keith, if you don't mind me responding just quickly, I think the idea of training sessions is a great idea, and the topic of education, particularly around launch and streaming, has been at the forefront of the Broadband Committee's focus. And they are, I think, looking forward to both learning and facilitating others learning how to do that. And so some of those live sessions is definitely an approach that I think they would latch onto. The other avenue that we're working on developing is as part of the subscription launch, the Broadband BI website is going through an overhaul, and Surtex has put together some content, including videos about how to stream, really educational programming, if you will, about how to secure that entertainment and news component that you may be getting in a different path. So that'll be content that'll be on the new website when it relaunches.
Thank you. And to follow up a little bit on Mark's question and my initial comment. Just sort of walk us through how this works. Kim Gaffett's service goes down. She calls the 800 number for Crocker's help desk. Is that, does that call then go to someone who's on island for Certex to figure it out? How does that tree work?
Yep, so the initial call will go into Crocker. And one of the advantages of this network and the way it's being designed and delivered is the the Crocker in this case will have actually visibility into the home equipment. So really what happens is they will ask a series of questions as to what the issue is. They'll be able to jump on the equipment and look at it. And I'll use two different examples. One would be, hey, we seem to be working fine, but in the other room, when they're on an iPad, they can't seem to stream a movie. Well, they'll be actually able to see the signal strength of the Wi-Fi device and either say, hey, you know what, you need to move closer to the Wi-Fi, or we need to adjust, put an extension in your house because it's too big to receive the services. So they're actually able to walk through a series of troubleshooting and questions with the subscriber to get down to where it may be. And then to answer your question, if what they realize, early on that there's no, I'll call it light, right? Because this is a fiber optic network, so they're sending out series of light pulses. If they realize there's no light going out, then yes, that call is escalated to the Certex team, in which case they need to be dispatched so that they can go out and realize that somebody cut a tree down and somebody interrupted the drop wire, or there's a problem on the side of the house. But with this network, those are fewer and far between, and the majority of the phone calls will be answered solved over the phone.
Terrific, thank you. Yeah, please.
Amy, I apologize a little bit. Certex this is Sven. Certex is having somebody on island 24 hours, 7 days?
I don't believe that is necessarily the case. That may be a natural evolution, but it is not a contractual obligation. There are metrics for how quickly they may need to respond to something, but it's not proscribed in the contract.
Okay. Always thinking worst case, I guess.
Mhm.
Is that something that we should be monitoring and revisit? Should it be needed to revisit?
Very much so.
Monitoring response times.
Monitoring the quality of that relationship. When we talked about that Certex contract, we talked about that framework of making sure that it was responsive and responsible to both parties. And that's a great example of, if it is not working, we will change it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And one quick follow-up to that too, the way that the network's being rolled out, Certex, obviously is still doing construction, and they will be on island, and with the installs, they'll be on island for a period of time. So there will be, along with measurements, we can kind of evaluate, okay, wait a minute, if somebody wasn't here, that would have taken X longer, right? So they will be on island, obviously, for a period of time, but we need to, as Amy said, measure that all the way through to make sure that you're getting the service that you need to have, or have an, open discussion about it.
And JD, I'd like to add, this is Jim again, that in both the Certex contract that's been signed now and this Crocker agreement, we spent a lot of time and effort and put language in that talks about the vendor's responsibility and the town's responsibility, because we put a lot of effort into the service level agreement and to the quality of service and metrics that Certex and Crocker have to follow. But somebody has to keep them accountable. So we specify that in writing in these agreements, that the town has to watch that stuff and make sure that the vendor is held accountable. So that's true in the Crocker contract, as well as it was true in the Certex contract.
this is just a technical question. It seems like the data usage doesn't seem to level off. It seems to be perpetually increasing. And I'm just curious about, there's a guarantee, if I recall correctly, of sufficient bandwidth that guarantees 100 gigabytes per second. What, like, how big is that pipe, or how, how much light gets through there? Are we in good shape for the foreseeable future in terms of the capacity of the amount of data we can use or get?
Yeah, Keith, this is Amy and JD. Are you okay if I answer that?
Of course.
I think
Only if you answer it right, then I gotta
only
correct.
if I answer it right. JD, you can correct me if I say something
Yeah.
wrong. This is one of my favorite topics. I remember coming and presenting. Amy, well, like 3 years ago or so, 3 or 4 years ago, in front of this council. I was live then, in front of you, but not remote. And that discussion came up about, well, how much bandwidth is enough, and how much bandwidth should we have on this fiber pipe off the island, in the undersea, the subsea cable, and then over to internet providers. And there was a lot of concern about it. And so collectively, the decision was we would basically future-proof ahead of time. So really what you're getting is future-proof ahead of time. So to give you an example, Crocker, in dealing with them, they have a network that they support, and I don't remember the numbers, I can look them up, but they're many more customers than Block Island could have, based on your population and your number of buildings. And the maximum usage through the day was, I think, something like, and Amy or JD, if you remember the numbers, then tell me, but I was thinking it was something like 4 or 5 gigabits at any given time during the day. So what New Shoreham has purchased is 2 100 gigabit connections. Now, they're not simultaneous, just in case you didn't know that. They're a failure model, so that one complete 100 gig connection goes from the telecom building on Block Island all the way to Boston, 1 Summer Street, a data center there, and plugs into 100 gigabits of internet. And you have another complete 100 gig connection from the Block Island telecom building all the way to Avenue of the Americas in New York City. The other than the section that's undersea and the subsea, other than that section to the telecom building itself, those routes are completely diverse, meaning that as soon as they hit Narragansett, one goes left, one goes right to get to Boston and New York. We did that to increase the odds that there would not be a redundant failure. So back to your question about 100, based on Mission Broadband studies, we're pretty confident that you probably would not use more than in the 10 gigabit range. Now, having said that, we still future-proofed it, and it would be great if you used more, and if the network used more, all the subscribers. However, based on internet traffic theory, we believe that the 100 gig by 100 gig, because of the diversity, will serve you very, very well for a long period of time. Now, there is language in the agreement, Keith, maybe this is what you're referring to, that talked about that Crocker will provide 10 gigabits to the internet in Boston and New York City, and then turn that up if traffic goes higher. That language is put in there specifically because Ocean, that is providing the transport circuits, those are the 100 gig circuits from Block Island Telecom Building all the way to Boston, and Block Island Telecom Building all the way to New York City. They were doing a big DWDM, a big technology upgrade on their entire network in Rhode Island. And based on supply chain and based on equipment and based on their what they call the DWDM, dense wave division multiplexing upgrade, that New Shoreham was benefiting by, we wanted to get the network plugged in before they could have the gear to support 100 by 100. 100 gigabits to Boston, 100 gigabits to New York. So we agreed that we would start with 10 gigabits to Boston and 10 gigabits to New York. And so that got coded into the contract, if that's what you're referring to, Keith, that it talks about when we go up to that, over that number, it will increase. In fact, as soon as Ocean is ready and we upgrade to the 100 gig level of transport from Block Island to New York and Boston, then Crocker contractually will honor that and upgrade it.
Terrific. Just a couple more. One is on something we're all concerned about, which is affordability. And I was really pleased that you incorporate the federal program in the contract that provides opportunity for subsidy. And I suppose this would be, part of the network owner responsibilities, but it occurred to me as I was reading it that we may want to provide people with help at the beginning for navigating through whatever hoops the federal program provides. I don't know whether the Crocker folks do that for any of the entities for whom you're providing service, but just sort of to throw it on the table, that's not one to be answered tonight. So that is one, and I can't remember the others, but I will say, just sort of, if anybody watches this on YouTube, read this contract, because if you take the time to read it, it answers a lot of your questions, and I really appreciated it as a layman because it was actually quite accessible and understandable, and I applaud you guys for doing that, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Oh, I know what the other thing was. I don't know whether you guys saw, but this week a Rhode Islander was appointed head of the external part of the federal Broadband for All program that is under Gina Raimondo. It's a woman, I think her last name is Cottam, and she has been the head of the Board of Higher Education in Rhode Island. And it just occurs to me that she may be someone we want to meet with or talk to when she settles in terms of opportunities for subsidy. Just didn't want to forget that while we're on broadband. Thank you. Thank you all very much for your work. It's extraordinary.
You're welcome. Amy, did we need to discuss Keith's question about the low income?
If I could have a minute of indulgence, just to share some information out back through the council to the public, because that process will be a little bit iterative, and I want to make sure people understand that. And it will be incumbent upon both Crocker and the town through Broadband BI to communicate what those steps look like. But Crocker can't apply to the federal program to provide the subsidy until they have live customers. So they need to go live in order to make the application, in order to then be able to facilitate those subsidies. So there will be a little bit of an implementation period for that affordable connectivity program. But as soon as the window is open and Crocker has been accepted and people then can apply directly to the federal government, we'll make sure that that is announced and facilitate getting people applied properly and troubleshoot any issues that they might be having.
So, Martha has signed up already for the educational program, class number 1. She doesn't know it yet, but she just did that.
No, she actually hasn't.
Amy, I'm on page 1 of the pricing, and 1, 2, sort of. just again, to reiterate a little bit, in our case, we have two of us in the house. We want fast up and down, and guaranteed, so we probably do that 100. Can you walk me through then pricing and how, and for those that don't have the sheets, you can look at them, they're right in the contract, but maybe Amy, you can just help us a little bit on how this works for everybody.
Sure. I'm going to take a stab, and if I'm not headed down the path that answers your question, let me know.
Okay.
But if you're looking at that attachment C pricing page and the 100 best effort service, you can see that the month-to-month pricing is $39.95, and that is for your internet service. Your voice service, if you elected it, has an additional charge, and that's down below. And then in addition, that's going to be a monthly bill that you get from Crocker, just like you may receive a monthly bill today from Verizon or DSL, DirecTV, or a satellite provider. In addition to that ISP charge from Crocker, you will also see on your Crocker bill that next column, which is a Town of New Shoreham operating and maintenance charge. And this is an amount that's collected by Crocker and remitted back to the Town of New Shoreham to cover operating costs of the town. And this would be things like paying Surtex to be the network operator, paying for insurance administrator for legal costs for the network, paying for transport, which is a service that we purchased from our third partner, Ocean, in order to facilitate delivery of the internet. So the town has costs to operating, maintaining, and owning this network over the long term. Capital replacement is a great example. So you'll have that charge on your Crocker bill as well, although it ultimately comes back to the town. Obviously, any fees and charges or fees and taxes are in addition. Those are set by state and federal law. And then the last column there would be an installation charge if you were connecting a new service or were reconnecting after a period of time. Does that help?
That does. Again, I'm hoping that people are either watching or will watch. So it's $39.95 during the best effort service level. And if we wanted a guaranteed service level, I guess it's 100. Is that correct?
That is correct. For your household, depending on what home business you may be,
Sure.
whatever activity you may be doing at home, it's generally not necessary to have a guaranteed service for your typical home situation. But if you wanted it, that would be the pricing.
Absolutely a luxury, sure. And then TBD for that TNS maintenance that you just talked about, and that'll be worked out. Is that?
That'll be coming before the council in very short order. Obviously, we need to finalize pricing in order to to sell service. But we did need just a little more time to make sure that those numbers are as accurate as we'd like them to be.
Perfect. And that is for, again, I think all of us at the table are limited in our technical knowledge. That is for one IP address, which means sort of a router can talk and go back and forth. One, right? I noticed there's additional IP addresses that you could have. Help me out with why I would want 256 addresses.
JD, do you want to take that one?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump on that.
That's going to be more on the business side.
Guys, hotels
And-
and that kind of thing.
Yep. And the way that the internet, the way IP gets doled out, it's called DHCP. You can use a variety of, you don't need multiple addresses. You don't even see those IP addresses. They could change, when routers reboot and all of that. And the actual typical end user subscriber doesn't matter to them. When you get into the business side, you may want multiple addresses because you're going to attach to firewalls and security devices and other routers and just a variety of things that are going to come into play that you want multiple IP addresses for. But the typical subscriber, it's called DHCP. It happens at the, network level and nobody ever knows about it and they're all happy to go on. But if it's needed, we definitely wanted to make sure that the option was there. One of the challenges, they call it IP version 4 right now, is there are not a lot of those available anymore and everybody has ordered them. And there's new technology coming out called IP version 6 and all of that will, play out over the future years. But for now, Crocker has plenty of IP addresses they can give away, but it's really select few that are going to need it.
JD, this is Jim. I just wanted to mention for clarity's sake that the typical home or the typical small business with the one IP address that comes with the service can run multiple devices in your home or business.
Oh, right, Jim. Thank you.
So I think in the question, you said something about how many devices or one IP address basically takes care of the home or the business.
Yep. And multiple devices on at the same time.
Multiple devices,
Correct.
5 devices, 10 devices, no problem at all. You could have several streaming TVs.
Keith is checking his internet phone right now and whether it's as fast as Marianne. So, we'll keep.
No, but it does raise an important, again, back to the education side of this. It would be very helpful when this gets rolled out. I'm sure this was thought of a year and a half ago, but sort of if you have 2 smartphones, 2 iPads, 2 laptops, and a smart TV, this is kind of what you ought to choose. Those kinds of things for particularly I have to say for someone like me, I don't need to know. I don't want to know how it works so much as I want to know that it works, and I'll pick the service level that will work for the devices we have. But I don't really know how to convert 1 gig and 1 gig down, 100 up into what I need for my devices.
Sven, if I may.
Yeah.
Sure. And Keith, that is probably going to be one of the most popular early questions. As we've relaunched that website, we've included a lot of FAQs, and that's one that's front and center, is what will likely be an appropriate package for my typical house, given these uses. So we are including content like that to help guide people.
And I think it would be great, Amy. In essence, it's how do I start moment, right? Or where do I start if I am this, then I go there. And it would be nice if there's some flexibility as learning curve, right? So
Yes, absolutely.
you can hit the wrong, package. Maybe there's you don't have to wait a year. And
That's correct. There is flexibility to adjust packages as needed.
that's what it said in the contract. So
Yeah.
Thank you. And then just again for everybody, for those that may not want internet, or they do or don't, but they want voice only, which means you can operate a voice system, that there's a separate package for that that they could have as well, right, Amy?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody in the audience? Anybody want a copy? David
I have
Lewis.
a question. I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, David. Hold on.
I know this has been asked and answered, but I'm asking it again. What happens to my old phone number?
That's actually a great question, Martha, and we haven't done that one tonight. So, and JD will interrupt me because this is not my specialty, but yes, you may move your number or port it, as it's called, from Verizon, who I assume everybody is with, to Crocker's phone system. JD, do you want to talk about that process at all, or?
Sure. So it is I'll call it classic telco process from old. So there is a little bit more to it. But you put in that request, and we call the term is porting. I want to take my number from one carrier to the other carrier. So we call it porting. You put that request in, Crocker places that order with the existing carrier. And it does take a few days for that to happen. And so we're cautiously making sure that the process that's built in for that allows that delay in time so that you'll always continue to have a phone and you'll be able to make outbound calls and people will be able to make inbound calls. But it is a bit of a few day, I'll call it up to a week process to make it happen correctly, because what also can happen is that number doesn't disappear, but it stops working. And that's a challenge, obviously, for people that, want their phone working. So it's done every day. So it's not a new process. All of carriers know how to do it and take care of it. It just takes a few days for it to work its way through the system.
And
But yes.
JD, this is Jim. I just want to quickly add that is a federal law, telephone number portability. When JD said something that it may not work, he's talking about for a few minutes while it's converted from one vendor to another, like Verizon over to Crocker. So that's what he was referring to when he said it may go down for a little while. It's part of the conversion process with telephone number portability.
Yeah, I think there are only a handful of people like me left, but I still have the number that came into the house when they put direct dial in. I don't use it, but I've got it.
Was it a 4-digit number at the time?
No, it was Howard 6, which translates to 466.
Yep.
Sorry. You have it too. David Lewis. And for those who are using the microphones, if you can speak up, the microphones are a little, we just need to speak up a little bit. So, all of us.
I have two technical questions, and technical questions are not my, hardware questions are not my area of expertise, so I struggle mightily, and that yields to these two questions. Number one, I'm very conscious of my own hardware points of failure inside my own side of the connection, which means my current satellite connection coming in. What am I doing it?
Councilors, I am not hearing.
Oh, the mic was not on. Let me start again.
Okay.
Can you hear him?
So hardware is way outside my area of expertise, and I'm particularly aware of the risk of points of failure that inside one's home that could be affecting my overall performance. For example, I'm comfortable with the Viasat signal coming in from my satellite and connecting to my router. Once it gets past the router, I could be my own point of failure and not even know it. Now, just recently, Consumer Reports had an article that I've printed, and it's in my to-read category, but it's directly related to where we're going with our new broadband system. The title of the article was, do I really need Wi-Fi 7, or should I be happy with Wi-Fi 6 in my router? And the reality is, I haven't got a clue what standard of Wi-Fi is in the one I got from Viasat 2 years ago, nor the one that came from Exceed 6 years ago, which is now obsolete and replaced by the Viasat. So my question really boils down to, how does that relate to the router that you're going to be putting into my home in a few months? And will it be the best available standard, and how long will it last till it'll need to be replaced with a new standard? That's the end of question one.
Okay. The Wi-Fi version obviously will be monitored when it goes out. Technology changes obviously at a very rapid pace. So there are provisions in the, I'll say the town Surtex contract hardware wise, that upgrades may be needed, but for the most part, those are all going to be seamless to the end user. If there's a code upgrade, I'll say, or a software upgrade, that's going to happen on a maintenance window. And so, it'll be obviously announced. Any maintenance window is announced to all subscribers, so they know what happened. It'll be tested ahead of time. Then it'll be, rolled out if need be from a complete global perspective. But also, Mr. Lewis, on the other side of it, when we talk about troubleshooting, that's where that comes into play, as well as the service providers are able to look into that router that they placed in the home, so they can see the services that are going on, so they can help you troubleshoot whether it's beyond that router or towards the network.
So that's the easier half of the question I think I was asking. I think can you tell me what the Wi-Fi standard is that will be in the routers that you, when you first install them?
Oh, I could. I'd have to do some research. Do you remember, Amy, what they said? I don't know if it's V6. Let me, That's right.
Yeah, I thought it was V6, but I don't know off the top of my head.
yeah,
It's
pretty,
close enough. I'll take that for tonight.
yeah.
And when I read the article, will all make more sense. Thank you. My other question is, I'm lucky enough to have a hardwired internal network that goes from my router to 3 different floors, each one having its own repeater. The thing that worries me is, since I'm weak on hardware, how in the world am I going to make sure that my new fiber implementation is going to be properly integrated with what's existing inside my house? And how do I pay the right technician who will make himself available, because we all know out here how difficult it is to get technical people available, to help me come through that?
And you cut out a little bit, so quick question. You said you had hardwired to your home. You have a switch that comes out of your router, or do all the plugs go straight into your router?
I have a wire that comes out of my router and goes to a switch, which
Okay.
splits into, goes to a splitter, and it splits into 3 hard wires going to 3 separate floors.
Yep, so the first, so when they install the router, they need to test from there. And we can talk with, some of the Certex folks, and they're used to working with customers as they're out there. The next challenge is going to be that that switch that you have, depending on the speed that has. If it's older, it won't be able to do the higher speeds like gig. And so you may be getting a lesser service out to your other 3 connections that are out there. But there would have to be some, kind of research, if you will, done on site to say, okay, what kind of switch is it? Can it handle the gig service if that's what you buy? Can it handle full 100, even 100 meg? Because some of these older switches, although they say 100 meg, not to get too technical, the throughput is far less. And so you could do a speed test from the far end and realize, hey, I'm not getting what I'm supposed to be getting, but it's the switch and not the, new network.
So, and will there be Certex of people available for me to hire when I need technical resolutions implemented?
If you need additional help on the in your side of your house, yes.
That was a yes?
Yes,
That's great. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
We're all looking forward to it.
Or we'll send Jim Rogers out.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm panicking here.
Just talk that-
Nothing, I don't have anything that's wired in my house.
It will work off of a router and you'll be able to access it. Where Dave's talking about is he put a splitter so that he had repeaters on each floor or each
Yeah,
area.
I got that all,
Yeah.
but I used to have wireless magic, and this will still work, right?
So
I don't think I need it, Keith.
they will install a router, assuming you have the service. They will put the cable inside. They will set all that up. They will have a router onto that cable that will send a signal so you can get it on your phone.
Yeah, 'cause
On the
I
internet.
have my phone, I have my computer, I have
Computer, your smart TV.
my smart TV. I gave up on that, figuring that one out.
They may be able to get it for you.
It's just a matter of putting numbers in. There were too many numbers. I want to be bothered.
So the answer is yes.
I am not. Limited technology
Anybody,
is all I need.
anybody else from the audience? Any other questions, comments? Marianne or Millie? No? Yeah, definitely.
Good evening, John Formica from Pilot Hill Road. Just a couple of points, I guess, listening in on the conversation. It seems like we're pretty far down the path with Crocker and been dealing with them, it sounds like, with this contract for a year and a half, and have a pretty strong relationship with them. My question is, or thought is, are there even other vendors that compete with Crocker? And let's say that they didn't perform at the end of their 5-year term. Is there even a practical alternative to them if we wanted that? That was the first point. The second point was, On the amounts that were talked about as being paid monthly for maintenance, is that going to go in a restricted fund such that it can only be used for that purpose? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Amy, do you want to take both of those?
Sure, I'll start and see how far I get.
Great questions, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Those are both great questions. And to the first, yes and yes is the short answer. In terms of other providers, we did have other respondents, and there are other ISPs, particularly small regional ISPs, who would be appropriately scaled to work with New Shoreham in the event that our relationship with Crocker didn't move forward in the way that we hope that it will. And the network is designed so that that ISP component can be, I don't want to say swapped out easily, but it is a little bit more of a commodity than, say, the network operator relationship. So we could go back out to bid, engage a different ISP, and there are provisions in that Crocker contract for how that transition would take place. To your second question, yes, absolutely. All of those funds related to broadband will be restricted for the purposes of broadband, much like sewer or water. It will be an enterprise fund of the town. And so it will be accounted for entirely separately. And those funds will be restricted for those purposes.
Hey, Amy, could I add something quick to that? The first answer?
Sure.
Probably everyone on the council and in the audience might know this, but the response to the RFP was a combined Certex Crocker Ocean response with some ancillary smaller vendors as one response. And the Amy and the broadband committee made a decision that the contracts and the vendor relationship should be separated to protect the town. So that's why we're talking tonight about this Crocker agreement, because it was separated from the Ocean agreement. You recall reviewing and signing that, and it was separated from the Certex agreement, which is the build and then the, well, years ago, the build, and then the operator agreement that Amy referred to. So we structured it that way to protect the town, so that if a particular vendor let you down, for example, Crocker, and they wanted a 10-year contract, and we fought back and we insisted that we wouldn't go more than 5 years to protect the town, so that if there's a problem with the vendor providing internet services to you, they can be swapped out, not like 2 minutes and a push of a button, but we, as Amy said, the network's been designed so that then ISP can change if we need to. So that was all very intentional when it was designed.
Thank you. Not seeing or hearing any more. Oh, sorry.
Just two quick comments. One's on Keith's brilliant suggestion to have either a high-speed or streaming for dummies seminar is an excellent idea.
We
and
don't
I-
use words like that anymore. Come on.
I will be in attendance for that. And the second one is something that David and Sven both brought up, and about an on-island tech. And this could prevent a wonderful job opportunity for someone island-based, a local technician, to grab a good, high-paying, year-round job.
Thank you. I noticed, anyway, perfect. Any other comments? I make a motion, if everybody's okay, I make a motion to authorize the town manager to sign the Crocker Communications Incorporated Master Services Agreement for ISP contract for the broadband BI island-wide network.
Second.
Seconded by Keith. Any further discussion? Mark, how do you vote? Aye. Martha?
Aye.
Keith?
Yes.
I am in affirmative as well. It passes unanimously 4-0.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you
Thank
for
you.
answering our questions very, very eloquently.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Congratulations. We're off and running. And our house will be connected tomorrow. No, just joke. That was a joke. That was a joke. Okay, item number 3 on the agenda, discuss and act the extension of the contract for GM2 Associates Incorporated for Engineering Services. We had that at the last meeting, and there is one or two bits and pieces of information. Marianne, can you update us?
Yes, sure. As you said, Sven, this was on the last council agenda, and unfortunately, I did not have the rates in hand. I have since talked to GM2, and they also have agreed to hold the rates that they submitted with the RFP on back in 2019. So the rates will stay the same for the next 3 years.
Thank you very, very much. Perfect. That was what we all hoped it would. And Marianne, thank you for getting that done. Any discussion before a motion's made? I make a motion to authorize the town manager for the extension of the contract for GM2 Associates Incorporated for Engineering Services. Is that starting when?
November 2022.
November 2022. Second. Second by Keith. We looked at the contract last time, so. Mark? Aye. Martha?
Aye.
Keith? Yes. I'm affirmative as well, and that's 4-0. Good to have them back, or continuing to be on board. Item number 4, is Nick here? Okay.
Yes, good
Discussion-
evening.
Yep, discussion with attorneys regarding zoning enforcement given the short summer season. I believe, Mark, you were the one who sort of asked for this originally, and I even though I didn't know you were going to be here, I thought it was really good to make sure that the concept, if I can paraphrase for a minute, the concept really was, boy, by the time there's sort of a notice or an identification of an issue, by the time it goes through our zoning and our regulations, and then goes through state regulations and gets notices and et cetera, it's 3-4 months later and the summer's over, right? So I have a violation, I smirk, stall, and next thing you know, it's October 1st. And that was the concept, I think, of the question. How do we shorten that up? Did I get that? Yeah. So Nick, can you help us with this? I know Jen Brady, has all the zoning enforcement regulations and knows the state, and I understand this is very state-driven, but help us with what other communities maybe are doing, have done. What can we do? Any ideas?
Sure. Good question. And again, Nick Solito, town solicitor. There's really the question, are we able to enforce zoning violations as fast as we possibly can under the law? When it comes to zoning laws, not to sound like a lawyer, but our ability to, as a town, to pass zoning laws is derived from state law. What's in the Rhode Island general laws, and then we can pass ordinances that are within the parameters there. I took a bit of a deep dive on your zoning ordinances, and you're actually quite restrictive in your zoning ordinances, almost as though in looking at the language used, like this question has come up before, and maybe it has years ago. By way of example, one of the phrases in your zoning ordinances is that a zoning board must hear a appeal on a notice of violation at the very next meeting. I've never seen a phrase like that in an ordinance. So this was very clearly on somebody's mind, whenever that might be. Maybe I'll defer to our resident historian, Miss Ball there. But very clearly, this issue has come up before. You, as a town, are certainly on the faster side with your ordinances as far as the ability to bring forth and then resolve zoning ordinances. There were, and I talked to Sven about this a little bit over the phone. There are circumstances that warrant even faster resolution of matters, and those, I'm sure you can guess, deal with health and safety. So while your general notice of violation for some type of violation out there, maybe it's a fence that was erected illegally, can be issued and compliance ordered within 10 days, giving that person the right to an appeal. There's an exception for matters that deal with health and safety. If a danger presents itself to the public, your building official can order compliance within 24 hours. That's pretty quick. And now that we're on the subject, just so everybody has a full understanding, enforcement of zoning violations can take two paths. One is administrative, that's through the town. The other is through the courts. And you might say to yourself, well, if it's taking a long time to go through administrative, the town level resolution of zoning violations, why wouldn't we just run to court and take care of it there? It's two reasons why. One, resolving these at the administrative level probably I'm just going to throw a percentage out, probably deals with 90% of these. It resolves 90% of zoning violations. Also, it does so on a relatively quick, and I know that's a choice term because that's why the reason why we're having this discussion, but it does it on a quick time frame that's specifically set by law. Contrast that to judicial enforcement, where you direct your solicitors to file an action in court. There's no set time frame with that, and it could take, as I'm sure you're aware, years to litigate a matter. That's with the exception of where you go to court similarly with what I just discussed on a matter that is a threat to public health and safety. So the short answer, now that I've gone on a bit, is your ordinances as drafted are pretty tight. They're almost as quick as they can be under the law. There are exceptions if a danger presents itself at both the administrative level, giving your building official the ability to order compliance with your zoning ordinances within 24 hours. And if that didn't work, again, dealing with a circumstance where health and safety is at risk, you could then direct your solicitors to go to court and get a temporary restraining order on an issue. I gave Sven, and I'll end with this, I gave Sven the example of a case I had about a year ago with a client. I was on the defense side of things representing the property owner. The property owner owned a big wood processing operation in a community, in a residential community. And there was literally chunks of wood being thrown from a wood processor onto neighbors' yards. That very obviously is a good example where the town was able to go in a pants on fire fashion to Superior Court and get a temporary restraining order because it posed a harm to the public. You're not going to see that every day, but that's a good example of when you would rush to act and frankly run to court to stop somebody's action that's posing a threat.
Thank you, Nick. Questions or comments, Martha?
Yeah, this is Martha. It's been an issue since, to my knowledge, I'm sure before this, to my experience, I should say, since the 80s. And it's always felt like it's not health, it's rarely, I should say, health, safety. It's more, lack of a better term, just nuisance nonsense that's going to take up time. And by the time you have to do all of the paperwork, and if you have, 50 violations for sign ordinances or something, that does consume a lot more time than I think people realize. And I think what we've always tried to, and without success, figure out a way of just not letting this happen in the first place. Because as you said, the clock runs out, the notice goes out, the appeal is filed. If the appeal is not granted, then they get an order against it, and the clock runs out, and it's the end of the season. And then everything sort of just floats around, and next thing you know, it's summer again, and we're back in the same situation. And it just goes on. And I've seen other seasonal communities. I haven't seen it anyplace else that's really come up with a great solution. I guess the old days was just go around and take everything down, but it ain't the old days anymore. Can't do that.
Thank you, Martha. Mark?
Nick, my concern isn't so much with the emergency issues or the health and safety issues. I think we're comfortable with them, or I'm certainly comfortable with that approach. Mine is these nuisances or these day-by-day things that we see and have seen for decades out here. Now, you say it can be handled within 10 days, or our ordinance provide for us to handle it within 10 days. Yet I'm holding in my hand a complaint that I put before the zoning official all the way back in May for something that's finally on the zoning board's docket later this month. Now, that whole summer, it's been allowed to be in place the whole time. So I don't see any speed in the process. We need a lot more stick and a lot less carrot here. How can we do it? Some ideas is, can we withhold licenses or permits for businesses that are in violation, in blatant violation?
That's a good question. And one thing I just want to clarify before I get there is the 10 days I mentioned. So big picture at the administrative level, you have identification of a violation. Then you have your building or zoning officer issue a notice of violation or a cease and desist. That's where your 10 days comes in, where compliance can either be had or not. Thereafter, the person cited has the ability to file a complaint with your local zoning board of review, where they're entitled to a hearing within 2 weeks thereafter. And I'm sure you can follow along that we're already getting along with the time frame here and getting towards the end of the summer. I can't speak to what happened with the one that you have in your hand. That might be a good question for the building and zoning department. But to your last question, Mark, just ask that again for me.
It involves getting licenses withheld or permits withheld from these businesses that are in blatant violation.
Good question. That's something I'm happy to look into, whether or not you can morph the two together, that you're violating our laws. So why should we give you the aid you're looking for? Completely fair question. If it comes up in practicality, please remind me, but I'll try to get you an answer.
What about annual issuances of building licenses? I mean, business licenses that can be retracted if someone's in violation, much like a stop work order on a building that's being put up if it's not in compliance.
So these are the licenses you folks issue annually. This is what we're thinking of.
If we were to establish business licenses for each and every business to make sure everyone stays in compliance.
There's a case that comes to mind, and I don't want to say the holding of the case because I could be wrong on my memory, but I know I'll have an answer when I'm able to find the case. It was some a business that was in violation of a provision of the zoning ordinance, and I believe the town went after a particular license. And ultimately, the court said that that was not appropriate, that you can't withhold a license for violating a zoning ordinance. Do I agree that that's how the law should be? No, but my recollection is that's what the law is. If I had the ability to make up law, I would probably make it the opposite of that. And it sounds like you would too, but to the best of my recollection, that's what the holding that particular case that I'm referring to stands for.
And wait, I'm sorry,
I'm
Mark.
just wondering where the breakdown is. If, in this case, I brought this to the attention of the zoning official all the way back in May. I didn't wait till it was the heat of the summer to bring it. I brought it all the way back in May in hopes of taking care of the problem, yet it's not on until an October agenda. Where's the breakdown, and how can we prevent that from ever happening again?
But Mark, is it on zoning for as an appeal?
Notice of violation, yeah.
But maybe worth to sit and go through the timetable, because it could have, well, I know
Well,
it seems like a
So
long.
You really don't want to get into, I think,
No, I
a
don't wanna get
specific
into
thing.
No, I don't
But-
want to.
but
That's
you-
why I
this-
didn't identify it.
The
Yeah,
seasonality.
and fair question, Mark. As to the specifics of that, I would suggest asking the person who handled that. I know it wasn't me personally, so I can't speak to it.
The seasonality is from my perspective, over the years, the seasonality is the problem. We have, for example, the liquor licenses do have a sign off by the building official. And if at, whenever it is those are signed off, it's always contingent upon that. And then businesses pick up their licenses, they pay all their fees, everything's fine. And then somebody, be it the owner or a tenant or a subtenant, which further complicates things, I think, pulls something on the 3rd of July, and we're back into that that problem, and somebody may not even notice it until the 5th of July. And then you've got to go through the whole process, and God knows if it's a weekend and everything is, it just feels like we have no, it's extraordinarily frustrating.
One thing, Nick, sorry, Mark, one thing, Nick, just so you know, other than liquor or vehicle, which are, we really don't have business licenses here by the town, right? So that's all state-based, as far as I know, running a business for a long time. So really there's little the town has other than zoning, et cetera, et cetera. So there's not really a license that any business has to get per se every year to be able to operate based on the town. One of the things that as we get into the budget season, Marianne, I feel strongly about is enforcement, just as a general statement across the board. And I know we'll have our meeting on Wednesday when we talk about priorities, but I would love, as we talk about budgets, to see whether there's zoning enforcement resources needed, budgets needed, just to make sure that we're funding appropriately, to make sure that we can get what the tools that we need, whatever that may be, so we can talk about it during the budget process. Keith?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, we have, what's that?
I'll put them back as you.
Yeah, we have one person who clerks 3 committees, does all of the zoning, all the, and a part-time assistant in that department. I don't know how we all. I'm really glad you put this on the agenda, Mark, because I agree with you, and I can tell the 4 of us agree. This is a source of great frustration, but unless we decide to invest in it, and then it will just continue to be a source of frustration, because we have I don't mean to speak for Marianne, but whether it's Millie and the clerks, or the building and zoning, or facilities, or whatever, we have a lot of one-armed paper hangers trying to handle all this stuff before you even get to bringing the file to the zoning committee, zoning board. So that's I think it's an important component of our ongoing, where we invest and how things are organized.
Nick, do you understand the collateral damage with this too? Someone could, as has happened before, take some A-frame signage for a business remote from town and put those A-frames throughout town and get away with it. And the collateral damage would be, if he's getting away with it, I can certainly do it. And it becomes sadly contagious.
Sure, understood. My suggestion would be, and I'm sure you have, make sure the folks who deal with this at the administrative level understand the importance of that. And I can't speak to this particular situation, again, not being a part of it, but I'm sure there's an explanation as to why a complaint went out in May or whatever that date may have been, and why they're at where they're at now. Again, just not having been a part of it, I can't speak to the specifics, but sure, absolutely, I understand.
Yeah. Nick, I think the only case you might be able to reference is what happened about 6 years ago, when a business working out of the King Spa was heavily fined as a result of a notice of violation. So maybe you could check that out and see how we could expedite what we did there so it doesn't take so darn long.
Sure. Thank you for that.
So thank you, Nick, very much, and it helps all of us talk about it, like Keith said, and I look forward to discussing this potentially Wednesday, but more importantly during the budget process, because that's the way it'll get fixed, I think. Yep, David Lewis. Sorry, David. Yeah.
May I make a comment on this topic? I think the emphasis of this discussion tonight has been relative to historic district and signs, or maybe generally speaking, or things that are seasonally driven. I think this is merely an indication of a problem that is pervasive in this town and has been for decades, and that's the love to pass rules and the absolute failure to enforce them, and to our own detriment, because there's a huge chunk of our own year-round and summer population who assume and take it for granted that there is no enforcement of anything on this island, and we can all do what we want. And you've heard me, a couple of you have heard me say this in other contexts. If we're not going to enforce rules, then we all should have the same liberty to break them, i.e. either get rid of the rules or make a serious effort to enforce them. We've seen it dramatically this summer because we essentially, in my opinion, we had our hat handed to us in a couple of cases that have been high visibility with hearings in front of the council, when in fact, one could argue that our failure to enforce on the smaller violations allowed bigger violations and to be enforced only at the end of the game, and only to have been lost and have our own hands slapped. I think we have to correct that, or in fact, we can only blame ourselves and not necessarily the 2022 experiences for degradation of the overall quality of life on Block Island, for the year-round population, and from our summer tourist economy. So it's really time to take this seriously and put the money behind it as well, too, because I understand you need people to enforce, and you can't have people being tasked to do more than they can possibly do in the various administrative offices. So you have my wholehearted support.
Thank you, David. We'll look for that during the budget discussions, because I
Okay.
think that's where it's going to be key.
Quick back up. I wasn't going to bring this up because I thought it was a little bit outside of the realm of the conversation, but since Mr. Lewis opened the door, thank you, David. I think everybody would be well to look at what we actually have in those regulations,
Yep.
because there are some things that maybe just shouldn't exist. And Mark just gave a pretty good example of the A-frames that are allowed, they're just on the sidewalks, and is there a line of sight issue with those? Is there further congestion? Maybe there are things we just shouldn't be even having at all, and I'm trying to get back to before we get down the road. What can we stop before it starts?
Yeah, if we're going to focus on enforcement, and I've said that now enough from my point of view, and I think, David, I'm right with you, let's make sure we're enforcing things that we want to enforce and spend time on, which I think, Martha, is your point. If we can cut out 15% of the items to enforce, that just gave resources and opened up time. So I think they're both hand in hand, yes. Sorry, Marianne, or maybe anybody. One way to do that would be to ask, I guess it's planning, to look at the zoning regs. I know they're looking at a whole lot right now. We're talking about an overwhelmed group a little bit, but I don't know that that's anything we want to embark on it. So I think it would be planning that if we decide to as a group, we can look at the zoning regs and then maybe have planning take a look at them to decide what should stay in or should be evaluated. Is that the next step based on Martha's comment?
If you're looking to review the zoning regulations, it's my understanding our zoning regulations haven't been looked at, reviewed, and/or rewritten in a number of years.
Decades?
Martha may know exactly because we were just having this conversation this afternoon. The rewriting of zoning regulations is a major undertaking.
Sure is.
So if you want to go down that road, again, I would take things off in chunks. We're looking at a number of ordinances now. I can sit down with the land use official and I can sit down with the planner and look at them and maybe come up with some pigeonholes, some that we can bring back to the council that may be more like low-lying fruit and work with our land use attorney. But zoning regulations is a major undertaking. And I think based on what I'm hearing and my conversation with Martha this afternoon, it's probably long overdue. Even when I look at the zoning regulations to read them, even reading them,
It's not easy.
it's not easy, yeah.
And to Martha's point about the stuff that's already there, our zoning ordinance actually requires that it be looked at every 5 years.
I don't know that it has been.
Yeah, I mean,
David's point.
it's actually it's in the ordinance.
Well, I can tell you the day of the last huge overhaul, but that was and there are things that have never been cleaned up since then. 89 was the big, major, huge overhaul. There was a land use revision to put the town ordinances in play with the state changes in the state land use ordinances. And then there have been a variety of things since then. But
Most of those since then have been ads. They haven't been.
well, that's part of the problem.
Right.
I think you've got.
They've added since '94.
I want to go back. I want to go back to
not necessarily
1967 when it was easy.
evaluated. Poof. So Marianne, maybe if you can, and we can look at it maybe in December or something like that, or January, whatever. If there's some obvious low-hanging fruit, but we should discuss putting this as a review, and we can talk about it, in the next council or
Let me
whatever.
spend some time noodling this and thinking about this, because I'm starting to think if we're going to talk about this via the budget session, maybe we look to hire someone, that's their project, take it on as a project, and work with the land use and the planning and stuff like that, and that's the sole project. So let me look at some resources that I've thought about as we've had this conversation,
We
too.
do have a work session that we're going to schedule in December, I believe, December or January, with the planning board. And this is one of the things that ought to be on the agenda.
I'm wondering if it'd be a nice internship project, too.
Yeah?
And I just got hooked up with your IMPA
Yeah,
program.
yeah.
I think I think this is where this all falls apart, is having been on the zoning board for 12 years, that a long, long, long time ago, but I don't think the point of what I'm saying is any different today. The people who know where the problems are the ones who have to work with them, not the people who write them. They write them and just pass them along. The zoning board knows what works, doesn't work. The land use office knows what works and doesn't work. I mean, those are people you need to get input from.
And so, Marianne, if you can noodle on it, like you just said, and let's sort of come up with a plan, and if that plan is for the planning board to look at it, then I think Keith's exactly right. Let's talk about that and have that on the agenda or discussion. My fear of the planning board right now, or fear for the planning board right now, is they've just got a boatload of stuff on their plate, and what I don't want to do is to have this pushed back too far. So your project person is an interesting solution. Okay? Anything else to be said on the subject? Hearing none. Discussion on special, item number 5 on the agenda, a discussion of special event license. Marianne, do you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah,
or-
I'll talk a little
or
bit. So
Pete?
it's my understanding that the council, a couple of requests have come from council members, mainly led by Martha, to revisit the special events ordinance or rules and regulations that we have here, based on some things that we've experienced this summer and other summers. So that's why this is on the agenda this evening. Currently, the bulk of it is that when there's more than 250 persons or more than 50 vehicles in a commercial zone of 75 persons or 30 motor vehicles in a residential zones, will require services beyond that regularly provided by the town, such additional service, police, traffic control, fire, emergency, medical planning, et cetera. What we do is we have this special events application that folks come in and fill out, is then sent to all these particular departments for their input. And based on their input, we add items or request items or things of that nature. It's my understanding that the council would like to revisit this. At one point, it did go before the council, all special events, but then they decided to redo it and send it administratively to the town clerks and staff.
And if it doesn't fit in, what we have seen here, at least, if it doesn't fit in the timing window, then it comes to the council for an exception.
Correct. Correct. If it doesn't come in prior to the 30 days.
Martha?
But just for information, I think everybody in the room knows this because we have such a packed room full of people who've been here for so long. Yeah, as some of you may recall, years and years ago, the Spring House did outside concerts, which I think ultimately they came upon, I think, a better business plan up there. But for the first few years, we had some difficulty with, and I was on the council back then, we had some difficulty with just pure numbers of people coming down on a Sunday afternoon to get back on the boat. And I just, this really struck me last year, 2021, that one of the things that, when they came before the council, that we said you can't do these on the 4th of July, on the second weekend in August, and Labor Day, just pulling out the big summer holidays. And it did have, it worked. And that if the council isn't doing these in the first place, we don't really have that leverage to say when you can do them and when you can't do them. I'm not sure it looks like it even reads like we still can, but again, this doesn't seem like something that has to be terribly complicated. I think it got a little more involved than it needed to be, and there's a problem with the numbers and the definition, and I know it's really hard to quantify any of these things, but, I mean, maybe people just don't want to be doing special events anymore. That would be helpful. But you don't like to, put a big family reunion in with a commercial concert. And there's got to be a way of divvying these things out.
Well, I hear you on people may not be wanting to do special events, but if I remember right, there was suddenly the beer run at the Black Island Club, which was suddenly an event, and
That came before us. That came
and it did come before us.
because of a liquor license
That's right, right. So
and things like that.
So I guess the question is, do we want to put this on for a workshop to really talk through it? Or what's the druthers to take this forward?
I personally would like it if Martha and Millie would sit down and come back to us with what they think a better version of this is.
Perfect. As long as my name wasn't nudged.
What is the time frame? What would the time frame be on having to get this done? Because I know people are already trying to plan for next summer. Next Friday. Let's be serious.
This Friday? I do think, to your point, Martha, I think people are planning major events. I mean, most of them are weddings that far out in advance, but there are probably some potential concerts or events.
I just want to be,
Can
I
it be
don't,
December 1st?
I felt like we were in a position, I guess it was 2 years ago, actually, that we didn't have a whole lot of leverage on
Yes.
pulling special event licenses because we didn't issue them in the first place. And that put the clerk's office in a very difficult position. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember that. I think I was here and asleep or something. Or I
And
gave,
here's a
I wasn't arguing back then. God knows when that was.
Here's a couple of suggestions I just came up with quickly. On the second page, letter H, just to keep in mind, Martha or Millie, whoever undertakes this, it states that outdoor events open to the public for which admission is charged shall end at 5. Well, they didn't charge admission for the Reggae Fest. So they bent that a little bit by not charging admission, so you might want to look at that.
So
Another thing
on
is-
those, I don't know that we need to go through them
No.
now.
These are just a couple of things, just to kind of stir your mind a little bit. Another one would be these weddings. Now, no one can say much, if anything, negative against the wedding business on the island. It's been a huge asset to the island. But in some cases, the collateral damage, the term I used earlier, is anything but beneficial to neighbors of people who have these events, especially the ones down the neck. So you got to look at all of these things individually to see whether that is a good idea, or we have to put a limit on those.
Those are limited.
Yeah, as opposed to, say, Holiday Haven having that one event, or Adrian having an event at his place, or Beachcomber having a single event that has very little, if any, collateral damage.
Okay, well, we're going to make Adrian his own zone. Let's be done with that.
So why don't, I like Keith's suggestion, maybe Martha, if you and staff, or Millie, can come up with sort of a plan in, I would say, middle of November?
No, I was just
I'm
looking at
thinking about people
timeline.
and timing.
And input. Yeah.
December? No, December's fine. I was thinking about people planning events out, so, you know, as long as we can do something by early January, or hear it, have discussions in January, that would be great. So maybe December, you don't have anything to do. I like the idea. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Millie. Thank you, Martha. Perfect. I do think that if there were practices in the past of not needing special event licenses for special events, because every day's a large capacity at certain establishments, I think that probably is going to go away very quickly. And obviously that's a council decision, but I think that will be pretty clear in the next month as we sort of move forward, so that can even set some of the tone for your work. Okay. Hearing no more discussion.
No, another good thing to put on that is a mandatory representation of the person who's making the application too.
At the meeting. Yes. Hearing no more. Item number 6, discuss and act on board, commission, and committees. First is accept the resignation from Steve McQueenie from the Commission for Motor Vehicles for Hire.
I'm just going to ask you to table that. He did make an announcement at the commission level.
But no letter has been received?
No letter. He was saying that he was going to get something to us in time, so I put it on as a placeholder, and we just never received the letter.
Good, because I wouldn't accept it right now.
And then therefore, I'm going to ask you to also, we'll hold off on the Pat Evans appointment, as he would be filling that role, although it's in motor vehicles for hire, he would be filling that role because he does hold a license as Steve. Just fits one of those provisions. So I'm going to ask you to just hold off on B as well.
C, discuss and act, thank you, Millie.
Thank you.
we're moving along. Discuss and act on possible vacancy on Historic District Commission. Possible because?
We have, there's currently a member who is having a difficult time attending.
Ah,
And we're dealing with that in as kindly a way as sensitive way as we can.
perfect. So do we really need to discuss that here, or we?
The clerk of the Historic District Commission asked that, was saying she's having a difficult time getting a quorum.
I know that, right?
So she was kind of putting it towards the council as she was asked to do, as she's required to do in the board committee and commission rules and regulations. So therefore, that's why it's on your agenda. You can choose to do nothing with it.
It would be my pleasure, or anybody else's, to contact that individual if, we want to as a council, and just sort of check in. And so we can table this till next meeting? Keep it on for the next meeting, or, okay? Thank you for reaching out, Keith. And, I mean, the issue gets to be quorum, right? So if they can't have quorum, then it's going to hold up a whole lot of stuff that are trying to move forward, and that then gets other problems. So, okay? So we'll move it to the next, not Wednesday, but the next mid-month agenda, and hopefully Keith can do his miracle work. D, announce vacancies. Dear Task Force 3, funny enough, there are 3 people in the room, so if you can all sign up, okay? No. Commission on Motor Vehicles for Hire, number 1, potential, 1. Police Advisory Commission, 1. School Building Committee, 2. Historic District Commission, nothing. Didn't mean to have that on there. Okay. Item number 7. Update on Ballards Inn Realty LLC regarding CRMC notice of violation. Mary Ann, do you want to just update everybody?
Sure, I
if they
will.
haven't seen it?
As the council will remember, back in August 17th, the town council adopted a resolution expressing concerns regarding structures and uses of Ballard's property. As the council is well aware, this falls under the jurisdiction of CRMC. Based on the resolution, CRMC did do an inspection of Ballard's right before, at the end of August. The result of that inspection, they did issue an NOV, which is dated November 27th, which is attached. As stated in the notice of violation, CRMC will deal directly with the property owner regarding this notice of violation.
And if anybody needs copies of it, and the town was in communication with CRMC when they were out here, right?
They did not call before they came out. They did let me know that they would be coming out here
Yeah, okay,
because it's jurisdiction with them and the property owner.
sure. Paper forgot to mention that. Okay, item number 7. The paper forgot to mention anything about the town, but okay. 8, correspondence, letter from Joseph Priestley regarding notice of public hearing, -32 Dodge Street, Block Island, OPCO LLC, Plot 6, lots 138, 141. We received a letter from Joe, and thank him for a developmental plan review. And then last on the agenda is approved minutes of September 16th, 2022, and September 21st, 2022, open and closed.
Because it's only 3, can we do them individually, please?
Do you have any comments?
Yes, on September 21st, open.
Okay, do you have comments on the other 2? Anybody have comments on the other 2?
Other than I have to abstain on September 16th.
Okay. I make a motion to, I'm going to go in sequence here. I make a motion to approve the minutes for September 16, 2022. Seconded by Keith. Any comments, objections? I hear an abstinence. You're abstaining. Martha, anything? Or is it tourism? Is it Megan Epler, your favorite topic? Motion made in second. Keith, how do you vote? Yes. I vote in affirmative as well. Martha?
Yeah, I found the tourism stuff in the 80s in the fall.
Written by Miss Epler Wood?
No, no, I'm just, we have like lots of baselines. Like
Uh,
every 10 or 20 years, we do another
I make a
baseline.
motion, oh no, you have comments on September 21st, 2022. Open.
Yes.
I thought we were doing the 16th.
We just did it.
Oh, I didn't vote. Yeah,
Yes,
I,
you did.
no, I didn't.
Oh. How do you vote, Martha? I'm sorry. I thought you said aye. I apologize. Okay, that's unanimous. And Mark abstained. 3 ayes and an abstention. Sorry, Martha. On minutes for Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, I make a motion to approve. We'll edit in a second. Is there a second for discussion? Second by Keith. Any edits?
Page 4, item 12, just on a date correction. First paragraph, second to last line, an extension was recently granted to the current tenant until April 30, 2023, it should read, not 2022.
Good catch. I missed it. I revise the motion to incorporate the edit on page 4 from 2022 to 2023. Keith revises second. Anything else? Thank you, Mark. No, we can, unless there's an edit. I will revise my motion to incorporate the closed session of September 21, 2022. So it's incorporating both the open and the closed with the edit to the open. Seconded by Keith. Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
Martha, how do you vote? That was an aye? Aye. Keith, how do you vote? And I vote in the affirmative as well. I really appreciate everybody being here. Please be careful that you don't, the hordes, we have to make sure crowd control leaving. Thank you all for attending via YouTube or Zoom. I make a motion to, or somebody make a motion. Okay, I make a motion to adjourn, I guess. Seconded by Mark. Keith, how do you vote? Yes. Martha? Aye. Mark? Aye. Thanks, everybody. I vote in the affirmative as well.